Hello everyone, this is Many Ninjas here. As you can probably guess from the thumbnail as well as the extra long video length here, we're not talking about just a single toy here, but I'm actually rolling together 3 different reviews in one, as all 3 of the figures on here in the background are based off the original Majin Vegeta figure released quite some time ago. So it kind of makes more sense to let's talk all about them at once. Kind of the plus and minuses of them and how compared to the original. Starting off here, we have the Demoniacal Fit Proud Prince figure here, seen in packaging, which pretty much is going to be as close as you get to more of a straight up clone figure compared to the rest of the ones in the slot here. Only, of course, as it's Demoniacal Fit and they do what they do, it's a clone figure with a few extra parts here and there that kind of help differentiate it a bit from the original product some more. In terms of the actual contents itself, you got about 4 heads on there, or 4 face bits, an extra head on there, which is unique to this particular figure, a couple of standard hands, although it's a bit limited, much like the original release, but it also comes with 2 extra food-related hands, as well as a plate of, I'm guessing this is supposed to be curry or something similar to that, which will come into play later. Now, in terms of how this figure stacks up with the original, it's actually a little bit taller than the original figure, I would say, standing at, if you go by the tip of the hair, just a smidge over 6 inches tall. So, probably because of the torso height or separation there, it does stand a little bit taller than the original toy, but overall not too bad. Now, in terms of how this figure generally handles though, for the most part, Demoniacal Fit tends to be pretty good about their quality control, although it is worth noting, as I'm kind of testing the articulation here, it is a bit stiff on my overall toy here, which will be good for holding poses and such, although in terms of the stiffness around the waist joint in particular, which I'm going to be experimenting with after the ab crunch, I just wanted to note that the waist joint, or waist swivel, was particularly tight, and this actually seems to be a relatively common problem with this particular toy, namely being, it's so tight that if you're really not careful, you can actually shear off the joint that's connecting the waist to the legs there, and cause it to break off or tear inside the body. Basically, your solution is going to be a combination of dipping this thing in some hot boiling water to make it a little softer to pop it apart, so you can either add some silicone oil, maybe slightly sand down the waist joint in there to make it a little more spacious, or perhaps a bit of the two together in order to really get it work without too many qualms in the future. Getting back to the actual figure movement itself, as you kind of been seeing me move it around this whole time, everything is perfectly movable, except for that waist joint of course, and if anything the toy is maybe a little bit stiff, but that's nothing a little bit of handling won't be able to fix. At least you know that way everything will be able to hold its position just fine. It's also worth noting though, as I'm kind of messing with the ankles and toes there, maybe the toes are a bit tight still, but once again that's nothing a little bit of movement won't be able to get to. So a little bit of playing with, hypothetically, fix it up with no problem. All in all, with the exception of that waist joint and some maybe occasional trouble with the wrist joints, from what I've heard as well, the figure seems to be handling well enough. It's just, particularly the waist joint, that seems to be a very common manufacturing defect, so just keep that in mind. Now here we have the Proud Prince side by side with the real figure, which you can kind of guess is the lighter blue one. So kind of the biggest difference you can tell right away is the use of colors. Namely, the actual Proud Prince figure, it seems to have a much darker navy blue compared to the real one, as well as the boots being a much lighter yellow color. Otherwise, in terms of hair color, it's about the same. Skin tone is fairly close, if anything. And it's also worth noting that there seems to be a little more detail on the actual bootleg's face and certain bits of the arm, and namely, the faces on the Proud Prince seem to have more veins on them, etched in as opposed to what the official figure had. Otherwise, in terms of detailing, they're actually pretty close. Maybe the plastic on the Proud Prince being a little bit shinier on the suit, but it might also be just the color that makes it a little more reflective that way. Speaking of which, proof of concept, face plates on there. This is actually a general test here to see whether I could get the two to fit and swap between each other in case you wanted to, since I know for the original figure, they actually had a long-standing issue where most of the North American releases were missing one of the faces and accidentally duplicated it. Unfortunately, if you were looking to use this in order to fix that issue, it's not a perfect fit. The Proud Prince faces will not necessarily fit well on the original figure's face. So, unfortunately, that will not be the way to kind of overcome that gap if you had an issue. In terms of the general accessories though, as we kind of look back here, as you can see, the figure does come with a series of hands. It's not too many, much like the original release, which I feel is a bit of a lost opportunity because you could have maybe opened up room for some more effect pieces going on, but at least what I can say is what you have here is not generally bad. As you can hear, that's these are the kind of the new effect pieces or new hand bits, specifically related to food consumption, for lack of a better term there, including a base Vegeta head, which is with him pretty much filling his mouth, stuffing his face, so to speak. In terms of the actual sculpt, the back of the head is pretty much the same as the standard one, only in kind of a dark black in that case, kind of a matte color. And in terms of the regular Majin Vegeta faces, honestly, they're pretty close to the original, except I'm noticing there's a lot more in terms of popping veins on the forehead on these particular ones that aren't present on the original one, or at least aren't as prominent. So that is a slight change in kind of manufacturing or how it's been assembled there that is worth noting. Actually, let's throw in a little bit of a bonus for you folks to go along with the food eating bits, namely being Son Goku's dining room set here. As you can kind of guess, this is based off pretty early Dragon Ball Z, and thus the accessories on there are all based to go around the Saiyan Raised on Earth figure, along with a bunch of chairs, plates, cups, and basically a ton of food-related accessories that can stack up neatly, and a few meals for good measure. Now, in terms of how this stacks up when you start putting it together, the table itself assembles pretty easily and can hold whatever you can put on there with no real problem on there, although the chairs were kind of a bit of an afterthought, to be totally honest, as the seats themselves do not snap onto anything and just float on there, ending up sliding all the time when you actually try to put a toy on there. However, I can still say more positive things about that than I can say about the background. As you can kind of guess, the background here is made out of an incredibly thin cardboard bit here, which, although it's very nicely printed on one side there, is honestly some of the flimsiest things I've ever seen, and uniformly came out of the box warped and unable to stand. So we're not going to be showing that anymore in this particular video. Going back to the Proud Prince proper though, and how he fits on the set here, honestly, once you get his hands and the new assorted base head on there, he looks pretty good, to be totally honest on there, with a face that looks better than what they actually sent out with the official set for the Saiyan Raised on Earth toy. As for how his plate of curry goes, admittedly, it's not a perfect fit. The actual plastic used on the plate is a bit more of a matte white finish than is used on the official one, and is also slightly smaller. However, it still looks presentable, so we'll give it a pass. All in all, the Proud Prince figure, except for that one waist issue, not too bad. A reasonable fit, at least if you don't have the original. For our second figure of this particular video, we're going to be looking at the Kong Studio Custom Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, which is pretty much actually just something that is made up in the video games, as frankly, Vegeta never actually used this form in either Dragon Ball Z or Super Proper. He pretty much skipped over to the next thing, which in this case was either Blue or Super Saiyan 4, depending on what you view as the next logical conclusion. Going on to the actual figure height itself, curiously enough, at least from the way it's been assembled here, it's slightly shorter at a little under 6 inches there than both the Proud Prince and the official figure, which is actually a little curious on there because I don't see any reason why it should be a little shorter on there, unless something got a little wonky in terms of the size of how it got assembled. Moving on to the articulation though, it is worth noting that the hair, which was kind of a big touted thing on this particular one, is pretty much as articulated as advertised on there. I'm actually quite impressed by how well it's movable, both up and down as well as on the left or right, so it's quite flexible to say the least, so I'm actually really surprised by that. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the upper body itself. It seems to be definitely favoring being kind of tilted back, probably due to the weight of the hair on there, which also does affect the neck joint. It's actually a bit loose around the actual neck to head connection, while on the part that connects the neck to the body, it's a bit snug if anything. Not particularly movable, but once again, it's probably to support the hair, so it's a known conceit. In terms of the rest of the body, most of the articulation is as you expect in terms of the double hinge elbows and the waist swivel, as well as the action body joints here, although it's worth noting that we're having the same weird kind of either stressed or scratched up plastic on the action body hips that seem to constantly be reappearing on the various Kong figures, so I have no idea what's up to that, if it's just paint scratch or if there's just some defects or wear from how these things get assembled. In terms of the splits, as you're going to see, yeah, it's actually a very beautiful splits both ways around, and in terms of toe joints, quite movable. All in all, it's a pretty good figure there. A little hard to stand, but unlike the official Super Saiyan 3 Goku figure, I can actually confirm you can get this thing to stand under its own weight, and you don't necessarily need a stand. Or a kind of a action stand, to be more appropriate. So that is a little bit of an impressive feat on its own. Now, in terms of how this stacks up in terms of likeness as well as colors, Perhaps a bit soft in some of the detailing here and there, but all in all, it's the Majin Vegeta body, to be honest. And in terms of color scheme, it really matches up more with the Proud Prince. Now, taking a quick look here, this is going to be the alternate torso that's provided with the figure, and admittedly, it's not... detailing-wise, it's actually a really nice look, but in terms of actual movement, it's not that great. It seems to have the same issues with being kind of stuck in a more backward position than the actual main figure itself, or the original ones. And in terms of the actual movement of the butterfly joints, and even the kind of the upper waist swivel there, they're very limited. Namely, one of the actual butterfly joints there, I believe it's the one that's on the right, is not able to move as far as the one that's on the left, and I have no idea why. Also, proof of concept, different neck joint that is specific to this particular line of toys, as well as other Kong figures to my knowledge. Moving on to the accessories, in terms of other accessories other than the torso, it's pretty limited, to be totally honest in there. You only got 2 alternate faces that are going on there, which, as you kind of see, is a bit of a unique one in terms of how they got around the face sculpts in this case. And you only have a few different hands on there, a bit soft on the details, but they're Vegeta hands. It's worth saying that pretty much at least it's equal to what the original toy had, even if the original toy was limited. That being said, as we take a look at the kind of more grabby hands, or martial arts grip hand, it's worth noting that the hands here are going to require some adjustments. Before we get to that especially though, let's take a look at how they actually get the new face plates on there. Namely, in this case, you can't pull the part of the hair up front off, it's actually attached to the rest of it, so you actually need to slide the faces off in order to make that, which kind of a downward forward motion. Might be a little tricky to get it off the first time with the first face there, but once you do figure out how to do that, you basically take that out, and then you slide the next one up and under. Mind you, on mine, slight bit of a gappage issue on their one, but otherwise, not too bad. Fully functional. It's just worth noting that maybe the forehead is a tad bit on the tall side. Looks a little weird, but you do get used to it. Switching on the last one just for good measure, just so you see how it looks. This one's kind of a more yelling face, if I recall correctly. A little bit of a smiling smirk on there. Generally speaking, not too bad on the faces, once you get used to the high widow's peak. Now, going back to the wrist joint. This is actually a very big point of contention on this particular figure. You need to take a drill to these things, and by that I mean the 2.5mm drill I've shown on the past. So basically, soak this figure in hot water, carefully pull the thing straight up in order to remove the hands on there, and what you're going to need to do is taking a few small twists, not like full turns, but like a small twist here and there, go to each and every hand that this figure has, and take just a twist or two to remove a little bit of plastic. Basically, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to expand the opening a bit so it's a little safer to take the figure hands on and off. The reason I mention that is because even very early on when this thing was going on sale, I think 5K Toys actually put out a small demonstration video and pictures to explain how to make this swap a little safer, because they kept breaking the hand pegs for people that were receiving the toys. As you can see, this is what it looks like when I have the thing officially cleaned up. All these hands that I were putting on there have had a little bit of a twist in order to kind of make it a little more safer, and the things still are able to safely pop on and off at this point. And they're not feeling particularly loose. They're still a little snug if anything, but they work a lot better than they used to. Another hand for proof of concept here. Once again, let's just get another one. Safely able to pop on and off. A nice good little click once you get that one. Maybe I'll need to fix that one a little more actually. Like I said, you do it in increments. You see me just doing a very slight twist each and every time. And from there, with a little more fix, yeah, that fits as it's supposed to now. And once you do that, a little extra work, but the figure will work just fine from there. All in all, how do I feel about this particular toy? The head is a little bit weird, I would say in this case. It is definitely a nice take. In terms of actual functionality, the hair is actually really good. It's balanced enough you can get it to stand with the actual native toy itself, which is something the official Super Saiyan 3 Goku couldn't do. That being said, maybe a little heavy on the actual paint job on there. And the faces do look a little dorky, for lack of a better term. Going on here, this is kind of a more direct lateral than the previous figure. We're going to take a look at the Kong Studio custom... I'm not sure how to... Actually, I think they gave this thing officially the Ultra Ego name on it. which, as you can kind of see, is effectively the same figure as before with the Super Saiyan 3 one, but with a different head. As we take a quick look on the height here, we can kind of see the figure is just a hair below 6 inches tall, which puts it about the same size as the Super Saiyan 3 figure we just reviewed, but shorter than both the Proud Prince as well as the official figure. Now, taking a look at the main body itself and how well it articulates, it's worth noting that this is effectively, aside from a bit of an extra bit of paint job, namely some pearlescent red or something on the body there, the bodysuit at least, this is effectively the same figure I just reviewed, so it has a lot of the same good and bad points, namely being that the upper ab crunch does not function as it's supposed to. However, the butterfly joints seem to be functional there. However, one of these arms, the right one, has a bad case of Bardock shoulder, so basically be very careful as things might be a little more snug than they're supposed to. Moving on to the rest of the body here, as I imagine the waist swivel is actually very tight on this one too, might need to fix that later, and the action body hips are the exact same scratchy plastic look. I'm really not sure what's going on there. Doesn't affect the performance of the toy, but it is worth noting. Now, in terms of the splits, the front and side splits are perfectly functional. Everything else in terms of the legs seems very good. Double hinge knees seem to be working fine. Ankles seem to be pretty good on there. Toes, yep, toes are more than functional. Wrist joints on the toy, you're going to need to do the exact same fix that we just did with the Super Saiyan 3 figure on this one too, because it's the exact same matter that's going on there. Now, standing side by side, you can kind of see, yep, the Ultra Ego figure is indeed a bit shorter than the rear one. That being said, still presents very nicely, especially when you put it side to side with the other figures we've been reviewing up to this point. Now, in terms of the alternate torso that's provided on there, I'm sad to say that aside from the slightly shinier paint job on there, it is indeed the exact same issue going on with what I just had on the Super Saiyan one, down to the exact same butterfly joint having an issue of not being able to move out, stuck at the same range as the other one. At least I can say that the upper arm torso, or not the upper arm, the upper arm swivels tend to be working a little bit better here than on the actual ones that are on the toy, so perhaps if I need to switch out the arms later, it is an option. Oh, as a side note here, in case you happen to have this along with the original Kong custom that had like the torn pants, which oddly enough makes it half a figure there, you can combine the two in order to make a whole battle damaged Vegeta look, just so you know. Moving on to the last bit of accessories, you got 5 different sets of hands, which are admittedly standard Majin Vegeta hands, so no real surprise there, as well as 3 different faces that are using the same kind of unique faceplate setup that were used in the Super Saiyan 3 figure just a moment ago. Now, in terms of detailing, that means the faces are pretty good, but once again, the widow's peak is kind of exaggerated, and of course, you have to slide the faces down and out in order to bring them out, and the opposite in order to put the new faces in. Once again, though, it is worth noting the faceplates don't always fit exactly as they're supposed to. Sometimes there's a little bit of gap, or they're a little loose in 1 or 2 faces in this case. But all in all, you can kind of MacGyver them in there with a little bit of work, and thankfully due to the darker hair color, it's not as noticeable in this case as it was on the Super Saiyan 3 head. I do kind of wish they put some extra expressions on there, like this one that's a little bit of a weird pouty face that I know is based off a panel, is a bit too close to the standard neutral face that I'm now putting on now, and kind of a waste there, but I know they did it on purpose on that one. It was with a reason. All in all, even though the figure does require a little bit of fixing here and there, maybe with the faceplates, and also watch out for some paint scratching, as it happened on the wrist there, I'm actually pretty happy with that figure overall. And with that said and done for all 3 figures, plus the table in this case, let me give you one last round of thoughts on each of the above. For Proud Prince, basically you're getting that if you missed the original Majin Vegeta figure, or you just want a more colorful version of it. By all means then, just watch out for the waist joint, that's a known issue. For the Kong figures, body issues are pretty prevalent through that one, as well as on the accessories, so those toys are going to be fixer-uppers. Between the two, I like the Ultra Instinct one more, just a more unique head sculpt all around, and the Super Saiyan 3 one, while very technically interesting, is a bit goofy looking to say the very least. Oh well, your mileage may vary on that one. And with that being said, having seen these in person now, or seen these covered, are any of you interested in picking up any of the above? If you've been thinking about it on the fence, and this goes yay or nay for you now, drop me a line in the comments. I'm interested. Hopefully this has been of some help to you folks. For now, take care. Catch you all later.